Rail in this country is a kind of case study of how to take something flawed but fundamentally really worthwhile and make it worse. Once there were trains everywhere, freight and passenger. Of course, cars took their toll as more and more of us began to own cars and to drive them. I remember those rail cars. I used to be able to go Wellington, Napier in one of those. And then in 1986, the Labor government of the time made rail a state-owned enterprise and jobs fell from over 20,000 to about 5,000 in a handful of years. By 1990, it was a limited liability company. In 93, it was sold and renamed. In 96, it was floated on the share market and wait for the $6 a share. By 2003, those shares were worth less than 50 cents. Now, with climate change and the pressure to reduce carbon emissions, rail is back. But decades of cost-saving, underinvestment and general asset deterioration mean rail's future must first of all be a response to rail's neglected recent past. And so this morning, the government is making a major announcement about rail and where it's heading. And to tell us about it, we're really pleased to be joined by Transport Minister Michael Wood. Morena, Minister, nice to have you with us outside. That's the Wellington railway station you're outside, isn't it?
Morena, John. It sure is. It's a great sight. We've got people pouring out of the station this morning, heading into work from the trains.
OK, let's talk about where they've come from. So they've come from the Kapiti Coast, they've come from the Wairarapa, they've come from the Hutt Valley, they've come from Johnsonville. What's in this for them?
What's in this for them is that rail, as you talked about before, has had a long period of neglect and underinvestment. This is about bringing a strategic focus for rail so that we can make the kind of long-term investments to improve the rail experience for commuters and to get freight moving around our country. We know that rail's got huge benefits, over $2.1 billion of benefits to New Zealand every year. We take 27 million commuter trips off the streets of Auckland and Wellington. If we keep building on that, we can keep bringing bigger benefits to our economy, to commuters, and we can help to decarbonise our transport network.
I just want to stay in Wellington a bit longer because that's where you are. 211 million for Wellington rail upgrades, including on the Wairarapa line, where people are arriving, presumably behind you now, from where? Wellington Station safety improvements and upgrades. So some money is being spent in and around the capital, right?
Yes, that's right. We have a significant program of work through the New Zealand Upgrade Program that's working through at the moment to improve the investment around Wellington, the Wellington Rail commuter network. And the New Zealand Rail Plan that we're announcing today looks forward over 10 years and plots out a strategic path to make further improvements to the network here in Wellington and around the country. And the key thing is this: before we had this process, rail was effectively having to turn up year by year and beg for the scraps. We've now got a strategic view about how we build up a resilient and reliable network, and this sets up the plan for that, for how we make the investments.
OK, well, essentially we're playing catch-up here, aren't we? I mean, there have been decades of neglect. Rail was the asset we kind of turned our backs on.
Yeah, rail, as you said earlier, was in a state of managed decline for many, many years. I remember when I first came to Parliament just under 5 years ago, and the chairperson of rail would turn up to the select committee and tell us about the fact that there were big parts of the network where the trains were just having to slow down to barely above crawling pace because it wasn't safe to operate at any other speed. So we've made over $4 billion of investment over the last 3 years to build up a reliable and resilient network to deal with that underinvestment. There's still work to do, and the focus of the rail plan is on the bread and butter, building up a reliable, resilient freight network and making sure that the commuter networks are working effectively. But as we move forward, we can look to make strategic improvements and expansions to the network as well. And we're already doing that. We've got investment in the third main line in Auckland, electrifying to Pukekohe. Hui are opening up a couple of weeks ago. Yeah,
I want to talk about the bread and butter though, right? Because I read the plan last night and I thought there's going to be some magic moment. There's going to be hundreds and thousands on the bread and butter or some wonderful jam. But actually, this is fairly fundamental stuff. You're right, getting extra lines in and out of Auckland so that you don't have the bizarre situation of traffic jams on our rail lines. But essentially, the big stuff, the exciting stuff, say a Tauranga Auckland commuter line, well, a passenger line or a Wellington Hawke's Bay passenger line or whatever, will follow. First and foremost, this is about getting the infrastructure right.
You did right. You do have to do the basics right first, John, and that's what we're focusing on with the New Zealand Rail Plan. and that in itself will deliver significant benefits to people. So think about the Auckland rail network, for example. Since 2004, the patronage there has increased from around about 4 million journeys a year to about 20 million a year, an increase of about 500% because we've taken that approach. Steady, staged, sensible improvements to give people better access and improve the experience for people. Double tracking where we need to, station upgrades, better rolling stock, and that has given so many more people access to the rail network. So those kind of investments are important. But there is also the longer term strategic increases to the network that we can look at. And again, we have been doing that. New freight line opened up between Napier and Wairoa earlier in the previous term as well. So we will continue to look at those investments, but you've got to do the basics right. That's what we're focused on.
Although you're making, the train line between Napier and Wairoa used to be a train line between Napier and Gisborne. And so once again, this is an example of catch-up. Let's use the example of the Tahuia, which is exciting in theory because it's a commuter service between Hamilton and Auckland, but it doesn't actually make it all the way to Auckland. It only makes it to the outskirts of South Auckland, and it's diesel. In other words, boy, there's a long way to go, isn't there?
Well, there is. As you said before, John, it has been decades of underinvestment and actually running rail into the ground. It was asset stripped during the 1990s, during that privatisation period. Massive deferred maintenance that just didn't go into the network. And of course, this is a safety critical network as well. So there's just an absolute onus, practically and morally, to make sure that the network is safe and that it is reliable to use. We do know that when we make those investments, there are significant benefits. Here's an important stat. The rail freight network at the moment, which most people don't see, takes 24,000 trucks off our roads every single year, making the network safer, making it less congested and reducing pollution. That's with the existing network. So think about what we can deliver with further staged strategic investments to increase the capacity of the network. This can be really critical for our country, for decarbonising our transport network, for decongesting our roads and for bringing economic development to our regions.
Right, for anyone watching who's looking at you and thinking, what's the Minister telling us here? And so this is an announcement about a continuation of investment in rail, a kind of catch-up investment in rail. But what difference will people see as a result of this? In 10 years' time, what will change? What will have changed as a result of what's happening now?
As a result of the strategic plan and the New Zealand Rail Plan and the investment that we intend to bring forward from it, in 10 years' time, Kiwis will see a rail system which delivers more freight around our regions, which connects our regions and opens up economic opportunity. Thinking about places like Ruakura out of Hamilton, where we're bringing together rail freight, roading and distribution centres and a massive economic development with Waikato Tainui. Commuters in Auckland and Wellington will see services that are massively improved. Many more people will use rail. The services will be faster, they will be more efficient, and people will know that we have a transport system that is integrated and that is reducing our carbon emissions across the country.
Final question about a fourth line in Auckland. Where are we at with that? So that we don't have this absurd situation where trains are just basically backed up, waiting for lines to get onto or waiting for the traffic in front of them to move.
Well, we're busy right now with a $300 million investment building the third main line. I've been out and visited there in recent times and we've got 200 people on the job there. That's a big part of our COVID-19 economic recovery, and it's giving us extra capacity for freight and commuters in that part of Auckland. And there is work to consider when in the future a fourth main line is appropriate. But those investments are going in right now alongside electrification from Papakura to Pukekohe. So for this government, the New Zealand Rail Plan is not just about what we do in the future. There's plenty of work going on now as well.
And stations and jewellery, extra platforms in Pukekohe, this is all exciting, but still no electrification all the way to Hamilton. Why the hell not?
Not at this stage, but as I say, John, we've got to focus on the bread and butter first. We've got to focus on getting services like Tahuia up and running, on all of those improvements that I mentioned before. But this New Zealand Rail Plan gives us a platform to think about making the strategic investments as we go forward and to be making really clear-headed decisions about what the priorities should be in terms of all of our objectives, moving commuters, freight and decarbonisation. So that's on the table, but we'll just have to work it through in a sensible way.
Transport Minister Michael Wood, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time on
Thanks,
what looks
John.
like a lovely morning in Wellington outside the station there. Thank you.